Thank you for joining our Meet the Speaker series. My name is Joe Spoto, and I'm the North Texas Chapter President and host of this year's Virtual Day of Training event. I'm happy to be joined by our esteemed speakers to share about our upcoming Virtual Day of Training, April 19th. We're hosting a day full of excellent presentations geared towards helping our peers find and follow their careers. If you haven't signed up yet, virtual seats are still available. Please check out the registration link below. Our goal for this year's Virtual Day of Training is to expand our property knowledge through a deep dive into the new DFAR 252.245-7005 rules, enhance our resumes, and increase our leadership skills. Today, I'm joined by Miss Ivonne Bachar and Mr. Angel Rosario, two of our awesome presenters. For those that don't know them yet, let me give you a brief introduction. Ivonne Bachar is a Senior Director of the Property Management Office for Stanford University. Throughout her career in property management, Ms. Bachar has held staff and management positions in research-intensive higher education, research and development, and commercial manufacturing requirements. These organizations are recipients of federal, state, and private funding through contracts, grants, and a variety of other types of agreements requiring broad understanding of compliance standards. Next, we have Mr. Angel Rosario. He is a supervisory property administrator at the Defense Contractor Management Agency, DCMA. He leads a team of property administrators across the Northeast continental United States. His background includes service in the United States Marine Corps as a personal chief. Angel has also held significant roles within the National Property Management Association, NPMA, including serving as the NPMA Nutmeg Chapter President and currently holding positions as the Certification Governance Board Secretary and National Director of Marketing Social Media. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Now let's get into it and meet our speakers. Understanding that asset management, a niche profession that spans across many, if not most, organizations, what led you to this career, Angel?
Thank you so much for having me. Absolute honor to be here and super happy to be a part of it. So I grew up wanting to be a property administrator ever since I was 6 years old, and I saw a career talk where they were talking about property administration, and I said, man, I got to be a part of that. No, I'm kidding. I did not know what property administration was. I started my career in the Marine Corps, like you mentioned, and as one of the jobs that I had while I was in the Marines had to do with inventory management for our office, for some of the equipment that we have. And we call it an embarkation officer. So you have a lot of like equipment and tooling and stuff like that. And we have to essentially keep track of that. So that's the first time that I was introduced to the career. But I essentially joined DCMA back in 2011. And it was one of the only positions that I kind of had some knowledge about. It was a position that was available. I was fortunate enough that they were recruiting for an internship position where you start out as an intern and then you climb up through the ranks. And sure enough, that's what led me into property management. I just had a little glimpse of it while I was in the Marine Corps. And sure enough, that was the first job after my career in the Marine Corps ended that gave me an opportunity. And here I am. And I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Thanks, Angel. Ms. Bachar.
Hey, gentlemen, and welcome to whoever's listening to this recording. It's really, really fun to be here and be part of this sharing of a teaser of information for you today. Rosario, I had the same trajectory when I was 6 years old, so we were on the same path. But interesting question in terms of how I got into the career, how it led into property management. My dream had always been to be a teacher. And that is my background, actually. I was teaching high school, taught a little bit at the junior college level, but I've always been interested in teaching. So you're saying, well, what does that have to do with property management? Well, I was a high school teacher. I took a 2-year leave of absence to go overseas. And for many reasons, which could take another hour's discussion, I opted for my own personal safety to come back to the US. Well, in the meantime, they had hired someone to fill my position. So I had to find some work, right, to keep me busy for the 2-year window. And I fell into a position that later on I discovered was property or asset management inventory control I had no clue that's what it was. I was responsible for ordering and shipping sample electronic component parts to sales reps for a company, for the sales representatives that were in Spain. Because I do speak Spanish, it made it a natural connection, right, to be able to do that. So that's what I did. I sent them orders, I packaged them, I ordered supplies, etc., and did that for a little while. And a friend of mine then worked at Stanford Research Institute, and he was a property administrator there, and said, "Hey, we need a tagger." What is a tagger, right? So I literally started my career in property, tagging assets, creating asset records. And over my trajectory there, I met one of my mentors, Andy Anderson, and that's when actually I was introduced to NPMA. Through that time, I was interested in contracts, again, going back to the whole training aspect. So from there, I was recruited to a for-profit organization, a large government contractor, and corrected and implemented their whole training and government property system. And from there, I was recruited to go to Stanford to kind of do the same thing, to develop and expand their property management system. So here we are, whole career later, very different from where it started, but very, very rewarding. So thanks. We all have a different path to get here, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ivonne. It reminds me of my own journey into asset management. First started in the Army, in the motor pool supply, and concluding with the S4 shop, with deployment to Iraq. I learned a lot there. Also, fortunately, Lockheed Martin took a chance on me, came back from the Army, and they allowed me to seamlessly transition to the defense contractor side, and in the process, introduced me to NPMA. With only a bachelor's degree, took certification seriously and paid all three as I could, to qualified for each. And unfortunately, each one seems to have increased my experiences and improved my own career exponentially in my own current role at RTX. All right, let's get to the goodies. We've drafted a few questions to help gain on insight onto the upcoming presentations. As it relates to leadership and asset management, what do you see as the leadership's role in establishing and maintaining effective physical asset management practices? Ivonne.
What do I see as the role for leadership? Okay. Well, leadership in my mind means a lot of different things. Leadership can be from a management perspective. Leadership can be someone taking initiative regardless of what level they are within the organization. So it kind of depends. Angel and I were just talking about that term, it depends, on the perspective. Looking at it from a management perspective, there's a few things I think are essential. One is, I think it's up to leadership. And again, it kind of would apply in pretty much any level or organization. Understanding what are your operational and compliance requirements. Ultimately, what do you have to get done? What do you have to get done? Why? Under what circumstances? What are the benefits to the organization? Staying current with what the industry practices are. Technology, for example, changes all the time, right? Specifications on contracts, contract language changes constantly, or can change constantly because each contract speaks unto itself. So those in my mind are pretty essential. Also, I think from a leadership standpoint, understanding what the role of asset management is within your organization and what they have to offer. We always think, we kind of lay low in an organization and property is not a problem until it's a problem, right? And then all of a sudden it's a bigger problem. So I think keeping in mind all those different perspectives. And last but not least, I would say keeping visibility visible from a positive perspective. Excuse me, not just because there might be a problem or a compliance issue, but from a proactive, positive perspective. So Many aspects, but those are a few that come to mind. Angel, how about you?
You nailed it. Love it, love it, love it. That was perfect. In my humble opinion, like you mentioned, leadership's role in establishing and maintaining effective property, it could play many different. Many different roles, and you could serve leaders, good leadership, no matter what level. Whether you're the first person, the new hire that just joined, or you're the seasoned veteran that's been there for 30, 40 years doing asset management. From a managerial perspective, if we think about it from a managerial senior leadership, some of the things that I think, some of the roles I believe that they serve and to ensure that they have an effective system is to be a networker. And when I say a networker, that means the person, the role, the person, the position that brings others together. For example, diversity in experience, technical competency. You could bring in other folks, other departments to help fill in some of the gaps and be able to look at something a little bit differently than has always been done. Because what we don't want to, what we often see is, or what I often see is some organizations somewhat fall to saying, "Oh, well, we do this because this is the way that we have always done it." And it's one of those things. It's like, okay, well, why are we doing that? Maybe we don't need to do that. And if you bring somebody, maybe you bring an engineer in and say, hey, this is what we're working on. We're working on this process, and this is what we're trying to get. We want to tag some assets, and this is how we're doing it. We do it after it's received and after we establish a record. That engineer may come up and say, oh, we considered X, Y, and Z. This is how we do, blah, blah, blah. It could be a contracting person. It could be it could be the warehouse. It could be anyone. And you will be surprised as to the ingenuity that we have when we bring in a diverse group of folks, different experiences, different backgrounds, different positions to help shore up and fill some of the gaps that we may not even know that we have. So one of the biggest roles for me that I would think for leadership at any level is to be a networker, and essentially bring people together.
Bringing those different perspectives, tying in the perspectives, right?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah, those are great. Really good ones. Thanks, guys. Okay, let's go to the next question. Staying in that vein, how do leaders align the organization's strategic objectives with physical asset management policies? You want to go, Angel?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So to align the organization's strategic objectives and with the company's property management policies, I think some of the most important things are leaders can do this by having clear communication, and that may sound like a cliche, like we all know that we need to be clear in our communication, but specifically explain what are the strategic goals. How does the organization plan on achieving some of those goals, and what role do the stakeholders fill whenever they fill that role? Because if they understand how what they do on a day-to-day basis, how what they do impacts the overall strategy, the overall goal, it gives a little bit more purpose to it, and they'll understand exactly why they're doing it. Somewhat related to the previous question relating to leadership and having an effective management system and what role do they play, part of the communication somewhat aligns to this question, which is, and Ivonne touched on it, what is the purpose behind it? Don't just say, okay, if you're the leader, my recommendation is don't say, okay, we have to comply with this because it's a regulatory requirement. So we have to mark. I'm gonna stay with that example. We're gonna mark property when it comes in, or we're gonna identify it, and we're gonna do whatever it is because it's a regulatory requirement. Well, why are we doing that? Well, the reason for that is because that way we don't lose visibility of it. We know clearly who this belongs to. We don't use it on the wrong contract or the wrong program, wrong project, so that we can have the right amount using the right program at the same time at the right time. We identify if there's any gaps, if there's too much in one, can it be reused on another one? But by explaining the why we're doing some of the things that we're doing, it helps. I believe it helps the stakeholders get that more in tune with what the strategic goal is, what the strategic path is, and be able to go, execute it effectively.
Absolutely true.
Okay.
A couple things I think are complementary to what you just said, Angel, and that is I think from again, a senior leadership perspective, balancing risk with the cost of doing business, right? Because in the end, you want to stay as an organization being profitable, being successful. Even if you are a nonprofit, right? You still need to have revenues, et cetera, to keep the operation running. So balancing the degree of risk that an organization is willing and able to take with continuing business and all of that. The other thing I would say is periodically kind of revalidating, hey, are we on the right track? Are we really fulfilling our mission, or are we kind of getting off on a tangent because, this technology was cool and great and it's going to answer all of our questions, right? So that combined with the comments you just made, I think give us a pretty nice picture of some of those strategies.
Amen. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, really good. Ivonne, your presentation is titled Policies and Procedures, an Essential Element in Your Property Management System. How do policies and procedures contribute to the overall effectiveness of a property management system?
Interesting question. And at first it's like, everybody has policies and procedures, right? Well, maybe. Yes, we all should have some degree of clarity, right, in terms of what we need to do, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, etc. If I were to look at several kind of broad 50,000 foot kind of view of, why is it important to have policies and procedures? First of all, I think they provide you a roadmap, right? They give you assistance and guidance and directives in some cases in terms of what needs to happen, what must happen, what should happen, what might be an additive that you can contribute to that. I think it clarifies expectations, it clarifies roles and responsibilities, it standardizes processes, because there might be many ways to achieve one particular process, right? But for efficiency and for consistency and for quality control, right, you want to have some standard of performance, and your policies and procedures, I think, provide that infrastructure that helps you enables you to be successful in doing that. And Angel, you referred to communication, a minute or so ago here. It's another way of communicating, another way of specifying what needs to happen and why. And ultimately, of course, it ties into making sure, it's a safe environment, it's a productive environment, it's an inclusive environment, it's a compliant environment. And I think it really contributes to the essence of success within an organization. So lots of different reasons. Those are just a few that come to mind at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you, Ivonne. Actually, with that in mind, can you elaborate on the process of developing and updating policies within a property management system?
Sure. Well, there's kind of two different perspectives you can take on that. One, are you creating something from scratch, right? Nothing previously exists. In that case, I would say one of the first things to do is start benchmarking. Angel, you were talking about network with other individuals and other organizations, kind of see how they do and why they do things the way they're doing. Ultimately, what you want to be sure of before you develop any policy or procedure is identify why you're doing it. What is the need for that policy and procedure? You don't want to have a whole bunch of rules and specifications and expectations that are not value added for your organization. So identifying that need and then figuring out to what degree of detail do you need to cover within a policy or procedure. So we'll just touch on a few key points because of course we're going to elaborate during our session. Angel, you also referred to getting buy-in, getting stakeholder interest. Okay, big part of developing policies and procedures. And on the 19th, we'll elaborate a little bit on how you can do that, right? And last but not least, I would say to be sure you have a mechanism to periodically review and revise. Things change, right? Organizational structure changes, terminology changes, processes change. There's always something different going on with your organization. So you're going to want to keep those as some of the key elements of developing and updating your procedures.
Excellent. And Angel, can you elaborate as well?
Absolutely, that was fantastic. Love it. Some of the things that I could recommend when developing or updating procedures, and Ivonne, that's an excellent point. Updating it, because sometimes you may have a procedure that may be 3, 4, 5, 10 years old, and business as usual. You think that this is the best way to do something. We're still scanning something or printing something and faxing it, when you could probably just use modern technology and email it or something along those lines. So absolutely right to revisit those procedures. And to your point about adding stakeholders and keeping folks involved, when developing those procedures, don't be afraid to ask the stakeholders. Ask the person, the shipping clerk, hey, this is what we're thinking of, how we account for this. What do you think? Does this capture the essence of what you're doing? How can we do it better? And that person may say, no, that takes a little bit more time because I have to stop this process and go there and make a copy, where we could just do this if we use a scan, some type of RFID tagging that identifies at the moment it comes in. That could expedite this whole process, 90% or something along those lines. So by keeping those stakeholders involved, having that diverse group of folks, no matter what level, innovation doesn't care what level the person started at, or how new they are, or how old they are, how long they've been in the company. So you may be able to leverage some of that experience and some of those best practices just by asking around. And another part of that is, once you develop the procedures, if you go back and you touch base with your stakeholders, you explain, okay, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. If they have some part in it, whether it was adopted or not adopted, they're going to have a little bit of ownership in that, and it's going to make it that much stronger. In a couple of years, 5 years down the line, when Joe Spoto is he's the president of the company, he'll say, oh, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this way? Young Angel Rosario could come and say, oh yeah, back in 2024, Joe, when he was the inventory clerk, he recommended this, and this is how we were able to expedite it or whatever. Now we have AI that does it for us, but that's the history behind it. And that's the sort of leverage. You'll have some organizational structure, some organizational knowledge, and folks will be able to take ownership of that process because they had a part in it. So great point. Truly appreciate it. That was great. If I could add one last caveat, it would be to write what you do. And this is exactly what Ivonne just mentioned. Write specifically what you do. So your policies and procedures, whether it be a desktop instruction or an overarching corporate procedure, indicate and write down specifically what you do, not what you want to do. Hey, we want to receive this in within 48 hours. Well, how long is it really taking? Is it taking 3 days to do it? Is it taking 1 day? Write it specifically what you do, and then that's sort of a benchmark, because then you're able to tailor it and measure it accordingly. Oh, you know what? Typically, we notice that at the end of the month, all of these widgets that come in, during the month it takes us 24 hours to process it, but the last week of the month, for some reason, it takes us 72 hours. Why is it taking more? And then you're able to kind of start peeling the onion back and figuring out if there are other things that are slowing up the production or the receiving or anything with the operations. So great question. Thank you so much for asking that one.
Yeah, and Joe, let me add one thing too. We tend to bundle the terms and use them interchangeably, policies and procedures. They are definitely complementary to each other, but they serve two slightly different purposes. And, knowing the difference between those, one is more about behaviors and performance and goals and objectives. The other is more about step-by-step instruction. And that's where it ties into, Angel, what you just said. What is it you do? Don't worry about making it pretty up front. Just write down what it is, circle back then, review, evaluate, edit, etc. So it's a very iterative process, actually.